Hey YouTube, so I've been continuing to get into this new Epiphone, this vintage Epiphone Riviera made in Japan project. I got this, check out my unboxing video, I got this on eBay as a disassembled project guitar. And it came very well packed, thankfully, because the post office had it for over 3 weeks, but we finally got it, and I'm just super excited. This is the kind of stuff I just live for. I love just restoration work in general, but these old guitars, it's just so much fun. I'm like a kid in a toy store with this. I've been working on, let me run down what I've been doing so far. So the neck is mostly just needed good cleaning up. I'm super impressed with the neck. I mean, this thing is on the playable side, it's mint. Like, there is absolutely nothing. There's no scratches, dents, or anything on the neck. The neck is immaculate. And I'm going to do a follow-up at one point. This has got one of these most modern Gibson style, or whatever you want to call it, where it's angled away. Okay, fenders go out straight so they don't have to deal with this. The angled away headstock usually has, in most modern guitars, most cheaper modern guitars, a scarf joint. Only real expensive stuff do you get a full straight piece of wood, Gibson being the prime example of that. That's part of what you're paying for in a Gibson over an Epiphone, is not having that scarf joint where you have two pieces, one angled and one here, and then they're usually mated with a specialized joint called a scarf joint. It's got a little bit of wood that connects them and so forth. But the older made in Japan style, rather than cheapening by doing a scarf joint, they have a ply neck where it is three pieces cut, where you've got one centerpiece going down that's basically about the size of you can just barely see on this one. There's just with the paint disturbances there, you see just there it is. You can see just a little bit where that middle one is. She's sleeping right now, but Fran from Japan, they actually accented that by staining it two different colors, so it looks like a feature rather than a cost-cutting measure, which kind of smart there. But I really, these multi necks, people can scoff at them, but there's no scarf joint, so you're not introducing any weakness up here. And well done laminate, when you're taking plies, and if they really are good at doing it, it can end up being stronger than a single piece of wood. And this is actually a really great example of that, because this took quite a tumble at some point, probably relatively recently, because the seller had a picture from about a year ago where it was a picture of his guitar up on his wall while it was still together, and then the pictures for the listing was in this condition, totally disassembled. And the damage was not in that earlier picture, so I'm assuming that there was some sort of, I think it fell. I think it was dropped, mainly because of where the damage is on the body. And that is right around the neck pocket, right here. And this is a bolt-on. We could theorize whether, if this had been a set neck, if it might have broke, or did that even make a difference? All I know is it's definitely easier to be able to take the neck off and do repairs here and put the neck back on. Much easier to deal with than if it was a set neck. And the same kind of thing, if you break a head on a set neck, it's a lot harder to deal with than if you break a head on a bolt-on, because you can just bolt another neck on there. I generally, for pragmatic reasons, I steer towards bolt-on, but I do also have that, soft side for a really good set neck. So I understand both, but it's not extensive, like huge catastrophic damage, but what happened here is that it looks like, and this has already been attempted to be repaired right there. You see the binding and ply right there has been reset. So this is going to take, in some sense, a little more work than if it had just been the damage itself, because I'm going to have to do some undoing work to undo. This is some kind of it looks like a real heavy, dense wood glue that's on here, and I generally, if I'm filling a space, I might use wood glue, or I usually prefer putty. But for actual gluing, I use almost exclusively Starbond. It's a CA glue. It is fantastic stuff. You watch enough of my videos, you're going to hear me talk about it. And they're not sponsoring me. Nobody at this point is sponsoring me for anything. This is the stuff that I use. And I use it all over the place. And all of the repair that I'm going to do in here, I'm going to use it. And the way that I do, now it comes with applicator tips on the bottle and stuff. I don't use any of that personally because this stuff is so, I use the thin fast set. And it's so slippery, it can get into every little crevice, but that means you don't want to use a lot of it because it'll get out of control really quickly if you're not careful. And so what I'm going to be doing here is I use a piece of heavy gauge guitar wire. I bend the end so I got a nice little grabber. I can dip it in the bottle, and then I just, the tiniest, like not even a full drop. A full drop is when I'm working heavy. But this stuff will seep and it just burns. Especially, it's so good at wood and strengthening wood because it's caustic, it's slippery, it's so thin, it's like water, and it literally soaks in and burns into the wood. And so it creates incredibly strong wood to wood fixes. And so here's the piece. Thankfully, I'm very, very happy the condition of the project because he had everything very well packed. He had it all in bags and so forth, and everything was well protected. So kudos to the seller for all of that. And he included this piece. He could have easily thrown this piece away, but this does a lot of work for me because now I don't have to cut a special splice piece in there. I'm going to be able to put the original piece back in, and while I'm doing that, reinforce all of this. And so this is going to be much stronger than it was stock. And that glue, when it hardens very, very hard. And again, it doesn't fill in the sense that it's thin, so it soaks. But as it builds up, it can create scabs over wounds and stuff that become like very hard scars. I just love it. Okay, so that's the other thing on the neck. That I fixed already is that in this tumble, presumably in the tumble it could also just be vintaging time and wear, but the fretboard was not super separated, but it was beginning to separate. And I do think it was damage, not just wear, because right here, it's very hard to catch on camera, but right there, and I've already started fixing it and everything, so it's even harder to see now than it was out of the box. But right there was some damage, some paint damage. You can still see the little flecks where it hit enough that it caused a little bit of separation there, just a little bit, and more separation on this side, but without the paint damage. And so what I did was I got in there with a thin pick and purposely separated just a little bit. I didn't want it to completely detach, but opened it up just a little bit with the pick so that I could see how far up it went before the glue started wanting to catch again, which was about to here. It was about to the 5. And so I drizzled that Star Bond in very carefully, just tiny bit, all the way down, and you just keep it so that you want it to be soaking in. So as I'm doing this one, I have it vertical like this so that the glue is soaking down in. And then use various clamps. I like these DeWalt soft clamps. I've got them in various shapes and sizes, and clamp it down. This glue, the Star Bond, works so fast that just a clamping for an hour or so is typically enough. You can, in like major repairs, I leave it overnight, but something like this, I could clamp it for just I clamped it, walked it away, and then when I come back a little while later, I was ready to keep working. And right after, this is the way that I deal with the overage. If it's if I'm doing something where I purposely want a scar to develop on top, I just leave it and I let it harden, and then I will sand and buff it down. But in a situation like this where I don't want to feel anything here, I don't want there to be a scar over my fix. So in this case, what I do is I use acetone right after, within about a minute after applying and getting it all clamped down. I will run just the tiniest bit, because you don't want the acetone to go in and mess with your bond. It's just I put a tiny bit on my finger and run it down, and wipe away what's there. Now it's only just going to kind of smear and whatever, but what it is you're weakening it, and then you can come back with a plastic razor blade, or I have this, I know it's a ruler, but I use it for all sorts of things because it has a really nice, it's a thin metal ruler. It's got this nice edge, and just very, 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 very lightly running it down like that, and it will, you can see the little teeny shavings there. You'll get these tiny little shavings, and you can shave it back without damaging, as long as you do it light and so forth. Like this was from yesterday, so it's mostly, I already did all this, but and then just the last thing would be to take some very high grade, I haven't done this quite yet, but to take some high grade sandpaper and run it down to get a perfectly smooth edge, and then it will be like there was no damage. So neck is all accounted for on that part. And looking now at the body, so we've got our plan going forward. I'm going to put that piece back in there. I'm going to need to do some excavating up here, and because there's that hard glue, I'm going to have to work that back and possibly re-break the bond so I can clean it out and get all that out, because it actually raised this a little bit. So we'll see that going forward. Now, one thing that I've already done, I did this last night just before I went to bed, is I've moved over, I generally, before, I've used the copper tape, which is really good stuff, and it's cheap, it's easy to use and so forth, but I've leveled up and finally bought myself some conductive shielding paint. This is the proper stuff from Stewart-Mac, and it is excellent. It is expensive. That little half pint is like 60 bucks, but you're gonna, as long as you keep it so it doesn't dry out, you're gonna be able to do a lot of work, because I mean it's paint, so it distributes extensively. And I've started to, now the conductive paint, the conductive shielding is to help keep noise out and so forth. Most important with single coils, but any guitar can benefit from it. You just have to make sure that there's nothing hot that's going to touch it. Nothing that you're going to ground out and short out into. Now, in terms of the wiring is still complete in this. He didn't undo any of the wiring. He just, took all of he took the pickups out and had them wrapped. And you can see one of the pickups more than the other, but both of them I'm going to need to clean up. They're in very good condition, but there is some oxidation on the back. And I'm also going to, because these are old enough, I'm going to wax pot them, and I'm going to use the candle method. And basically it's just, I'm going to fill in this back part with wax, and that will help. This is particularly helpful with hollow body guitars like this, which tend to have a lot of feedback, a lot of unwanted harmonics and so forth. They call that being microphonic. So this will limit the microphonic response from these pickups. It's very easy to do, super simple, and just literally using a candle is the way to go for DIY. Unless you're in a factory, use a candle. And what you want to do is you just burn it so that it pools up in there. As long as it's all hot, it makes a nice even layer, and then you let it cool off, and you're done. And it will greatly reduce that unwanted feedback and so forth. So I've got that on the agenda. The other thing, the switch. The fella said I'm going to need to replace the switch, and I'm really not sure. I need to go and see if I can find some pictures of this model guitar and so forth. The weird thing is that this switch is a on-off on, so the middle position is actually off. I had to kind of rub through the oxidation, but once I got to, I was like, that's an on-off on. So because I hooked it up, and you can test even if you don't have anything else other than the electronics. You can always test your pickups by plugging them in and tapping lightly on the poles with something metal, and just like a little Allen wrench, and you tap them and it pop, pop, pop. Okay, so the electronics were working, but I noticed they were working in the position 1 and 3, but not 2. But then when I got to looking at it, I said, wait a second, this is an on-off on. I can't imagine that is the original wiring, that you would have a kill and you wouldn't be able to blend it. That's very, very strange. So I'm assuming that was a repair or something at some juncture. That can't possibly be stock. But anyway, I've got on order. It's supposed to be here, I think, tomorrow. So very soon I'll get another switch put in there and get that taken care of. But otherwise, the wiring all looked really good. It's got the Gibson style with the ground wire on the outside as a sleeve, the metal casing on there, and it's all very well done. And I didn't, I checked the pots and everything, and there wasn't any issues on that. So I think other than just replacing the switch, the electronics, and doing the potting, cleaning up and doing the potting on the pickups, I think the electronics are going to be good to go. The one question I'll still have is once I get it all back together, I'll see if the jack is in good enough condition or if it needs to be replaced. That's an easy job. But so far, the restoration is going great. I'm really, really excited about this thing. It's just such a cool piece of vintage gear, and I'm so happy to be able to bring it back to life. As always, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Just building the channel and things are getting moving. And check in. I've got all sorts of projects going. This one is kind of butted in line because it's so cool, but I got all sorts of projects in various states of building and rebuilding. I've got mods up on the queue and all sorts of stuff happening in the channel. So check in. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful day.